My beloved child. There is something I must reveal to you today. Not because you searched for it. Not because you demanded answers. But because the moment has finally arrived for a hidden truth to find its way into your heart. Somewhere beyond your sight, beyond your awareness, a conversation took place. A conversation that involved your name. And what was spoken in that moment carried more emotion than anyone expected. You may find this difficult to believe, but there are connections in this world that exist long before two souls ever stand face to face. There are bonds that begin quietly, invisibly, moving through time like a river finding its destination. Your soul recognizes one of those bonds. And today, that bond stirred. The person connected to you in ways neither of you fully understand found themselves speaking about you. Not casually. Not accidentally. But with a depth that surprised even them. At first, they tried to hide it. They told themselves these feelings were temporary. They convinced themselves that what they sensed could not possibly be real. Yet every attempt to ignore it only made the connection stronger. Every distraction brought them back to the same thought. You. There was a moment recently when your presence entered their mind without warning. Perhaps it was during a quiet evening. Perhaps during a crowded day when countless responsibilities demanded their attention. Yet somehow, among all the noise, your energy stood out. And when someone asked about what had been occupying their thoughts lately, something unexpected happened. For a brief second, they hesitated. Their heart moved faster. Their expression changed. And before they realized it, they began speaking about you. Not your appearance. Not superficial details. But something much deeper. Something far more powerful. They spoke about a feeling. A feeling they could not explain. A sense that someone was moving closer to their destiny. A sense that a missing piece of their story was beginning to awaken. What shocked everyone listening was not merely what they said. It was the sincerity behind every word. Because people can fake excitement. They can fake confidence. They can even fake affection. But genuine recognition, that cannot be imitated. And everyone around them felt it. They noticed the change. They noticed the softness in their voice. They noticed the way their eyes seemed to drift somewhere far beyond the room. As though they were seeing a future they could not yet describe. And while they spoke, a realization quietly emerged inside them. One they had been resisting for longer than they wanted to admit. You were no longer just an idea. You were becoming real. Closer than they expected. Closer than they were prepared for. Yet this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Because after speaking openly about what they felt, a question was asked. A question so simple that it should have been easy to answer. But instead, it left the entire room silent. The question touched a hidden truth they had never spoken aloud before. And the answer they eventually gave. The answer that escaped their lips after a long pause, would leave everyone completely speechless. What they revealed next changed everything. And that revelation is only beginning to unfold. A strange silence settled over the room. Not the kind of silence created by uncertainty, but the kind that appears when a truth is so powerful that words suddenly feel inadequate. The question still hung in the air. And for a moment, it seemed as though your soulmate might avoid answering it altogether. Their eyes lowered. Their thoughts drifted inward. Memories they had tried to ignore began rising to the surface. The walls they had carefully built around their emotions started to crack. Then, they finally spoke. And the first words that left their lips changed the entire atmosphere around them. They said that no matter how hard they tried to move forward, no matter how many distractions life placed in front of them, there was always a feeling pulling them back towards someone they had not fully met yet. Someone they could sense. but could not explain. Someone who felt familiar before becoming known. The people listening exchanged confused glances. How could someone miss a person they barely knew? How could someone feel connected to a soul they had not yet fully embraced? Yet your soulmate was not speaking from logic. They were speaking from somewhere much deeper. From a place where the soul remembers things the mind has forgotten. And as they continued, the emotions became impossible to hide. Their voice softened. Their defenses faded. Their carefully protected heart began revealing pieces of itself. They admitted there had been moments recently when they felt an unexplainable pull. Moments when they suddenly stopped whatever they were doing and wondered about the future. Moments when they sensed that someone important was walking toward them through the unseen pathways of destiny. And every time that feeling appeared, peace followed. Not anxiety. Not confusion. Peace. As though their spirit already recognized the energy approaching their life. What nobody realized was that this confession was only the beginning. Because hidden beneath everything they were saying, there was another secret. A secret they had never shared with anyone. Not friends. Not family. Not even themselves completely. For a long time, they had carried a quiet fear. A fear that perhaps the kind of connection they longed for did not truly exist. A fear that deep love belonged only to stories. A fear that destiny might pass them by. But recently, something shifted. Signs began appearing. Small moments. Unexpected encounters. Strange feelings that arrived without warning. Pieces of a puzzle that seemed disconnected at first. Yet together, they formed a message. And that message kept pointing in the same direction. Toward you. Without realizing it, your soulmate had begun preparing emotionally for a chapter they never thought would arrive. A chapter filled with understanding. A chapter filled with growth. A chapter filled with a connection that would challenge everything they believed possible. But then something happened during that conversation that nobody expected. Someone asked them another question. A question that immediately changed their expression. Their smile faded. Their eyes became distant. And for several long seconds, they said absolutely nothing. Because this question touched the deepest part of their heart. The place where their most guarded truth lived. The place they rarely allowed anyone to see. When they finally responded, even they seemed surprised by what came out. The answer revealed a feeling they had been carrying for much longer than anyone knew. A feeling connected directly to you. And once those words were spoken, there was no taking them back. The room became completely still. Because everyone realized they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not a prediction. Not a coincidence. But a genuine moment of recognition. And what your soulmate confessed next, the part they almost kept hidden forever, is the very thing that could change the course of this story. The energy in that moment became impossible to ignore. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked away. It was as if time itself had slowed down, waiting for the next words to emerge. Your soulmate sat quietly for a few seconds, staring into the distance. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because they finally understood what they had been feeling all along. Some truths take time to reach the surface. Some truths travel through years of experiences, disappointments, lessons, and unanswered questions before they finally reveal themselves. This was one of those truths. When they finally spoke again, their voice carried a different weight. A different certainty. They admitted that there was a presence they had been sensing for quite some time. A presence that seemed to appear during unexpected moments. Sometimes during quiet mornings. Sometimes late at night when the world became still. Sometimes in the middle of ordinary days that suddenly felt meaningful for reasons they couldn't explain. At first, they dismissed it. They told themselves it was imagination, wishful thinking, a passing emotion. But the feeling refused to disappear. Instead, it grew stronger. And the more they tried to ignore it, the more impossible it became to overlook. Because this wasn't simply a thought. It felt like a knowing. A deep inner certainty that someone important was moving closer. Someone whose arrival would make sense of experiences they had never fully understood. Then came the confession that nobody expected. They admitted that they had recently started changing. Not on the outside, but within. Old fears were losing their power. Old wounds were beginning to heal. Old disappointments no longer controlled their future. And what surprised them most was that these changes seemed connected to a person they had not fully met yet. A person whose energy felt strangely familiar. A person whose soul seemed to be calling to theirs from beyond the visible world. As they spoke these words, something became clear. They were no longer afraid of the connection. For the first time, they were welcoming it. That realization sent a wave of emotion through everyone listening. Because genuine transformation is rare. People often talk about change. Few truly experience it. Yet your soulmate was describing a transformation happening in real time. A preparation of the heart. A quiet unfolding. A spiritual awakening of emotions they had once buried beneath caution and doubt. But then, their expression shifted once again. This time, there was a softness in their eyes that nobody had seen before. And what they said next left the room completely silent. They admitted that sometimes they found themselves speaking to the universe about you. Not by name. Not because they knew every detail. But because they could feel your existence. They would wonder where you were. They would wonder what experiences had shaped you. They would wonder whether you felt the same strange pull they felt. Whether somewhere, somehow, you were also sensing that something important was approaching. And then came a statement so honest that it stunned everyone. They said they would rather wait for something real than settle for something temporary. They would rather be patient for a meaningful connection than rush into something that lacked depth. Because deep inside, they believed the right person was worth waiting for. The room remained quiet after those words. Not because people were confused, but because they understood. They could hear the sincerity. They could feel the truth behind every sentence. Yet there was still one final secret hidden beneath everything your soulmate had revealed. One detail they had not shared. One realization they had only recently discovered themselves. And when that realization finally surfaced, it connected every feeling, every sign, every unexplained moment they had experienced. The revelation was so unexpected. So personal. So profound. That even your soulmate struggled to put it into words. Because what they were about to reveal wasn't just about the future. It was about why this connection had been unfolding all along. And the moment they finally explained it, everything began to make sense. Without warning, the atmosphere shifted once again. It was as though an invisible thread had been pulled tight, drawing every moment of the conversation toward a single truth. Your soulmate sat quietly, reflecting on everything they had already shared. The room remained still. No one rushed them. No one interrupted. Because everyone sensed that something important was about to be revealed. Something deeper than feelings. Something deeper than attraction. Something that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. Then, with a calmness that surprised even them, they began speaking again. They said that for years they had searched for answers in all the wrong places. They searched through achievements. Through distractions. Through endless attempts to fill spaces in their heart that never seemed completely satisfied. And for a while, they believed that was simply how life worked. They believed everyone carried an emptiness they could never fully explain. But recently, A realization had started to unfold. The emptiness was never meant to remain. The waiting was never meaningless. The unanswered questions were never punishments. They were preparation. Preparation for a chapter that would arrive exactly when it was meant to. Preparation for a connection that required growth before it could fully bloom. And as they spoke those words, something clicked inside them. A piece of the puzzle finally fell into place. They understood that every delay had served a purpose. Every lesson had shaped them. Every disappointment had strengthened parts of their soul that once felt fragile. Even the moments they wished they could erase had quietly prepared them for what was ahead. That realization brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of understanding. Because suddenly, the journey made sense. The twists, the detours, the unanswered prayers, the long periods of uncertainty. All of it seemed connected to something larger than they had ever imagined. And then, they revealed the secret they had been carrying. The secret they had struggled to explain even to themselves. They admitted that lately they had been feeling an overwhelming sense of trust. A trust they couldn't logically justify. A trust that whispered that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. Even when circumstances appeared confusing. Even when timelines remained unclear. Even when the future could not yet be seen. Deep within their spirit, they felt guided. Guided toward someone. Guided toward a connection that was steadily moving closer. And the more they listened to that inner voice, the stronger it became. What astonished everyone listening was not the words themselves. It was the peace behind them. The certainty. The quiet confidence. Because this wasn't the voice of someone chasing an illusion. It was the voice of someone beginning to recognize destiny's fingerprints on their life. Yet there was one final realization that had not yet been spoken aloud. One truth that remained locked within their heart. A truth that explained why your energy felt so familiar to them. Why certain moments seemed strangely meaningful. Why certain feelings refused to disappear. For several seconds, they hesitated. Their heart knew the answer before their mind could fully process it. And when they finally allowed themselves to say it, the room seemed to hold its breath. They admitted that every time they imagined their future, every time they pictured happiness, every time they envisioned peace, growth, and genuine love, the same presence appeared. The same feeling returned. Again and again. No matter how much time passed. No matter how many circumstances changed. That presence remained. Steady. Constant. Waiting. And for the first time, they stopped questioning it. For the first time, they accepted it. But what happened immediately after that acceptance? What occurred in the days that followed? Would become the strongest sign yet that this story was moving toward a remarkable turning point. Because soon, an unexpected event would take place. An event your soulmate never saw coming. An event that would make them realize just how close this connection truly was. And when that moment arrived, nothing would feel the same again, just when your soulmate believed they had finally understood what their heart was trying to tell them. Something unexpected happened. Not a dramatic event. Not a loud announcement. But something far more powerful. A moment so subtle that most people would have overlooked it completely. Yet for them, it changed everything. It began on an ordinary day. A day that seemed no different from countless others. The world moved as usual. People rushed through their routines. Conversations came and went. Nothing appeared extraordinary on the surface. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Your soulmate felt it before they could explain it. A strange sense of anticipation followed them throughout the day. It felt as though they were standing on the edge of a new chapter without yet seeing the first page. And no matter how hard they tried to focus on other things, that feeling remained. Growing stronger. More persistent. More impossible to ignore. Then came the moment. A single experience. A single realization. A single spark that caused everything they had been feeling to rush together at once. Suddenly, memories connected. Questions found answers. Pieces of the puzzle that had seemed unrelated began forming a clear picture. And the picture led back to one truth. The connection they had been sensing was real. Not because someone told them so. Not because they wanted it to be. But because their heart recognized it. There are moments in life when the soul understands something before the mind can explain it. This was one of those moments. For the first time, they stopped searching for proof. They stopped demanding certainty. They stopped asking whether they should trust what they felt. Instead, they simply allowed themselves to believe. And that belief unlocked something extraordinary. A new sense of hope. A new sense of purpose. A new sense of excitement about the future. It was as though a light had been switched on inside them. A light that had been waiting patiently for the right moment to shine. As days passed, people around them noticed the difference. Their energy changed. Their outlook changed. Even their smile carried a new warmth. When others asked what had happened, they struggled to explain it. How do you describe a feeling that words cannot fully capture? How do you explain that your spirit feels closer to something meaningful than ever before? How do you tell people that your heart has begun recognizing a connection long before your eyes have seen the full picture? The answer was simple. You don't. You simply feel it. And your soulmate felt it more strongly with each passing day. But there was another layer to this story. A realization even deeper than the ones that came before. Because while they were discovering these feelings, they also began understanding something about you. Something important. They realized that your journey had not been easy either. That you had your own lessons. Your own challenges. Your own seasons of waiting and growth. And strangely, instead of creating distance between your paths, those experiences seemed to bring your stories closer together. As though every challenge had been preparing both of you for the same destination. The same meeting point. The same extraordinary chapter. Then came the thought that stopped them completely. A thought so powerful that it stayed with them for days. What if the waiting was almost over? What if the signs weren't pointing toward some distant future? What if the connection was already drawing nearer than either of you realized? The possibility sent a wave of emotion through them. Not fear. Not doubt. But anticipation. Because deep inside, they sensed movement. A shift. An approaching moment that would carry significance far beyond coincidence. And that is when they made a quiet promise to themselves. A promise nobody else heard. A promise spoken only within the sacred space of their heart. They promised that when the moment arrived, when destiny finally opened the door, when the connection standing just beyond the horizon became impossible to ignore, they would not run from it. They would not hide from it. They would not let fear make the decision. But the remarkable part is this. Only a short time after making that promise, something happened that felt almost impossible to dismiss. A sign. A realization. A moment of confirmation. And what it revealed about this connection would leave your soulmate completely speechless. The message hidden inside that moment is what changed their understanding forever.